Welcome back everyone to episode 10 of Salmon Report, a weekly series where I share my tips and hints for each rotation in this week of Salmon Run to help you win more of your shifts. The feedback to our new format has been overwhelmingly positive, so thank you so much for that. I'll do my best to further improve this series constantly. I'm also thinking about expanding and opening our Discord server more to make it a proper Splatoon Discord. Let me know if that would be something you'd like. But let's get started for this week. The rotations this week are Sockeye Station with Reflux 450, Slosher, Clash Blaster, and the 96 Gal. Gunfish and Hydro Plant with the Splashomatic, Squeezer, Splat Roller, and the Tri-Stringer. Spawning Grounds with the Gluga Doolies, Ink Brush, Squiffer, and the Heavy Splitling. And the fourth is on the Sockeye Station again with Enzap, Sloshing Machine, H3, Nuzzle Nose, and the Hydra Splatling. A fun week with some excellent opportunities to try new weapons and learn new tricks from the usual boring shooters, and while it might not be easy, learning the weapons of this week will be very handy for the future. This episode won't have stage tips like the last one, and I will try to focus on weapons this time around, but I'll make sure to come up with something special for the next episode. First rotation on Sockeye Station is quite interesting, but might be the weakest this week in my opinion. The Reflux 450 is a surprisingly great weapon for Salmon Run despite its bad reputation for being weak and only good for painting. It's a fast weapon with excellent painting that comes useful in Salmon Run, but its DPS is also surprisingly high with proper technique on how to use it. It's quite similar to the Bamboozler that to master the weapon you have to learn its partial weapon charging to deal optimal damage. It's also quite mobile that can play aggressively, in which case your partial charges will help you out in a pickle. Partial charges are in fact the best DPS for most stringers, but it also requires you to be in the perfect range from your enemies to still hit them with all your arrows. It's definitely not an easy weapon and also weak if used incorrectly, but with proper practice and learning how to use your partial charges to also hit multiple opponents in a cone will help you clear hordes better too. Then the Slosher is, in my opinion and overall statistics wise, is pretty much one of the, if not the weakest weapon in Salmon Run. It's a Slosher, so sure, it has great area attacks against weaker hordes like Chums and Small Fry, especially in special waves where it matters, but it has terrible DPS, quite ink inefficient, and doesn't really excel at anything to make up for its weaknesses. Play very carefully with it and don't overestimate the weapon, but with a few Slosher tricks it can improve itself a bit, such as delayed attacks and the arch sloshing technique to aim above enemies. The Clash Blaster is one of my favorite weapons on the other hand in Splatoon, mainly for how stupidly fun it is, and it also has its uses in Salmon Run. It's a mobile weapon but with a pretty short range and fast fire rate. This makes it a very easy to get into and learn weapon that also doesn't require special aim, so most players won't have trouble with it. Thanks to normal blaster area attacks, it's good horde clearer that excels against Small Fry and Chums, but also very useful in night waves like Grillers and Glowfly Rush to take care of the lessers there. Like most blasters, they decimate stingers and also fish sticks. Just be careful as they are on the lower end DPS wise, so anything with a lot of health will go down very slow, and with their short range and bad painting, they can get stuck very easily. Then the last weapon is the 96 Gal, and while it isn't on the top end of the list, it's probably the weapon that should focus on Kohazuna this rotation if it comes to it. It is a very long range, short firing, heavy shooter. It deals excellent damage and is easy to use, but its strengths are also their weakness at the same time, as the slow fire rate also makes it have pretty bad painting and they will easily get overwhelmed by a horde of salmonids. Keep to range, play defensively, and focus on bosses as your other teammates will have way better weapons against lessers. This is pretty much a combo rotation where the weapons have to play together as they complement each other really well. Second rotation on the 24th to the 25th is on Gunfish and Hydro Plant, and the first weapon to talk about is the Splashomatic. It's a standard shooting weapon, not much to say about it really. There is a group of shooters in Salmon Run that play relatively similar and are just all-rounders with no real weaknesses. The Splash is such a weapon. The big mistake most players make is assume just because they have also the same name, they are almost the same weapons, but it's very wrong and causes a lot of problems. It's nothing like the Splushomatic. The Splashomatic is in fact way weaker than the Sploosh and should not be used for high DPS situations. Instead, it should play safely and secure while also going for Golden Eggs during Kohazuna. The Squeezer on the other hand is a special shooter in Splatoon and has its two firing modes similar to the Bullpoint Splitling, making them one of the most versatile weapons. By tap firing, the Squeezer gains very long range and high burst DPS that can take down faraway bosses with ease, but it's often forgotten and unused continuous fire should also be used a lot. Players often discard just because they see lower numbers, but in fact the hold fire for Squeezer is its best DPS in case of longer fights, such as Kohazuna, since it consumes ink way slower while not losing that much damage. So in short, use the tap fire when you want to deal a lot of damage in a short time, and use continuous fire when you want to paint or you want to deal the most damage over a longer period, and you have the time to empty your ink tank. The Split Roller is your average roller that is jack of all trades, flinger and roller, and will require you to mix the two different ways of playing a roller to maximize your gameplay. Practice flinging into rolling for a good damage combo and learn to position well with this weapon, as it's very similar to shooters that it's more about your player awareness than special tricks. Of course, like all rollers, they are excellent against weak hordes and glowfly rush waves, so make sure to utilize the slow rolling to protect your team, but I can't recommend enough my 1-minute guide to rollers on the channel to get a good understanding on how to use them. Last, the Tri-Stringer, also a pretty hard weapon to learn. Stringers are a very versatile weapon type, but they are still too new for most players to use them well. Tri-Stringer excels at long range and dealing very good damage similarly to a charger, and though they are also not the best, I think the Tri-Stringer is the Kohozuna killer this rotation thanks to its long range and decent DPS with partial charges. Remember that the Stringers deal the most DPS by half charging them instead of full charging that requires practice, and it can also be used to clear hordes more efficiently. Your full charges also leave bombs on the ground that can deal good AoE damage against chumps and small fry, but this is also one of the hardest techniques to learn to use properly. Play safely and at range, let your teammates get into closer fights instead. On November 25th to 27th, we'll be playing on spawning grounds and with a fairly decent weapon composition. The Gluga Dualies are one of the higher DPS weapons in Salmon Run and is definitely a Kohozuna killer once you get to Extra Wave. Glugas are long range and slow firing dualies that sadly remove a lot of versatility from them compared to the best dualies, and so they aren't that great. They excel at long range boss splatting, but their painting and fire rate is very mediocre and can easily get overwhelmed, so instead stay at range and remember to use your roll to have the best DPS you can output. The Inkbrush is considered one of the weakest weapons in Salmon Run by many, and it's definitely not one of the better weapons, but it has its uses and is way better than most say. While its DPS isn't that high and its low range makes it less useful in splitting bosses, but what it's great at though is it's probably one of the fastest weapons to move with in Salmon Run, allowing you to be pretty much the best egg collector or the best weapon to react to stingers on the shore, as you can get in and out in no time. Make use of your brush movement by holding down your fire button to really make best use of the ink brush, while also utilizing your fast and large area attacks against lesser hordes such as chums and small fry to clear them, especially during griller and glowfly waves. The Squiffer is the best charger in my opinion for Salmon Run. It plays like a normal charger, but it's faster with a better ink tank efficiency, and most importantly, it can charge itself with normal speed while jumping, which is huge. Full charges will deal with most bosses as they still have more than enough range to handle them, and what most players forget to do with chargers is that they are still excellent lesser salmonid clearers. Your full charges pierce through enemies and you can clear a whole horde with a single shot. And now that you can charge while jumping, you also have the mobility to back up your charger with safe movement. Feel free to play more aggressively with the Squiffer and practice lesser clearing to be a great asset to your team. Then the Heavy Splatling, an overall really powerful weapon, definitely one of my top picks for Salmon Run, thanks to its more than good damage, average charge up time and great range to handle pretty much any situation. As most Splatlings, it deals very high burst damage, but not as much as the Hydra Splatling or the Ballpoint Splatling to make them worth shooting at Kohozuna too much. If you want to deal a lot of damage burst, but if you have to refill your ink tank, your continuous DPS isn't that high. Heavy Splatling excels at best to keep the basket area safe, and that is what you should do. Make sure your team is always safe to go back and don't wander too far away. The rest of the team is way better at that and instead control the stage to have the least amount of lessers and bosses on it in the center. This rotation will test most teams to use the ink brush and the Squiffer well, but once mastered, I think this is my favorite of the week. Last rotation is once again on Sockeye Station from the 27th to the 29th. First weapon is the NZAP, same jack of all trades category shooter like the Splashomatic or the Splatter Shot. Don't overestimate its damage and play safe with it to help your team and keep the stage stable. They can handle pretty much all bosses, so prioritize high threat targets and clearing lesser salmonids, but remember your DPS isn't high enough to deal with big shots alone. The Sloshing Machine, since it got buffed in Splatoon 3, is now quite incredible but still a hard weapon. To fully master it, you need to understand its firing mechanic and the area tag that comes with it. By shooting above hordes, you can make sure you will hit all the enemies with your area splash instead of hitting them one by one, and your delayed attacks by splashing into the air above you can help you one-cycle bosses like a Drizzler, or attack Scrappers and Steelials behind their shields. I recommend my Sloshing Machine video for full explanation on these tricks to help you learn this excellent weapon. Then the H3 Nuzzle Nose, I think, is quite in a weird situation. It's a strong weapon, but it comes with its niche burst firing mode that sadly just isn't good enough for Salmon Run. This mode requires consistency above all, and having breaks between firing is just really a huge weakness. Still, your long range at high damage still helps with long range boss plating and taking down priority targets like stingers, especially in Sockeye Station. But beware of lesser salmonids and being overwhelmed by hordes, so keep to being at long range. Finally, the Hydra Splatling is back. So this is the highest DPS non-Grisco weapon in the game, and by far. During Kohazuna, it's not even a question. Your task is to fire every single round you can into Chungus and you will melt it. Let others deal with eggs. The Hydra Splatling excels at long-range damage dealing. It has great paint, damage, and range to deal with any threat. But its weakness is that it needs a lot of time to charge up and is very heavy and slow weapon that can easily get overwhelmed. A lot of players struggle with it, and what I recommend practicing is to learn just how much you need to charge against each target that might get close to you. The target dummies in the training room all represent a specific salmonid. Learn how much you have to charge exactly to deal with all of them individually, and that experience will greatly help you keep yourself alive, save a lot of time when you're surrounded. And with that, that would be everything for this week in Salmon Run. So many fun weapons and tips to practice, to be fair. I also can't wait to record some new footage, and maybe I'll do my 1-minute charger guide this week thanks to the Squiffer returning. I hope this week's tips will help you all succeed more. There were quite a few things to say, and I think understanding these weapons will make all the rotations pretty fun, I would say. You know the drill. If you have anything else to say or you have a question, share it with us in the comment section, and if you haven't done it yet, like and subscribe to help the channel and see more Salmon Run content. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.